Hello and welcome to episode number 90 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, Mark, the Green Tank, and with me, as always, are the two backup tanks, as I like to refer to them as, Neelan, the Orange Tank.
Hello.
And Kellen, the Red Tank. Both backup tanks.
No, I was trying to explain what a barrage was.
Okay.
Bro.
You
Barrage.
doubt our...
Barrage.
As our good friends, Spobo and We're Not Wizards say, Spobo stands for... A barrage is like an artillery, like a tank.
I think you're underestimating our listeners' vocabularies.
What's an artillery, Mark?
Like a armored unit?
Don't edit this.
So, it's taken us 90 episodes, but I think we have played board games out. I think we're sort of done with it. You know, there was the golden age of games and all that stuff, but now they're over. So we are transitioning to a hot new product now. It's sweeping the streets. It's all the rage with the kids. A little game called Magic the Gathering. You can look this up if you're not familiar with it. You may find some results on Google, I think.
Getting some traction.
Yeah, getting a little bit of traction. So, yeah, we've decided to jump on the ground floor.
I've been told there's things I can tap.
That's right. If Kellen can tap it, he's into it. So we are going to be talking about what are referred to as the Magic the Gathering player archetypes and how they relate to board games and board gamers specifically. There's an idea that Magic the Gathering players can be divided generally into three categories. We'll get into that later, but we'll just see how much crossover there is between that idea and what we see in our day-to-day gaming in the board game hobby. But before we do that, as we always like to do, we're going to be talking about the games we have played this week. Kellen, what have you been playing?
So we got sent a review copy of a game that is coming back to Kickstarter soon, and that is called FlickFleet. If that title seems self-evident to you, it probably is. This is a game about space fleets and flicking those space fleets. So I just adjudicated a 1-versus-1 game of Mark versus Neelan playing a game of FlickFleet. This is a space skirmish dexterity game, incredibly light, plays in less than a half an hour, where you're setting up acrylic spaceships, you're moving them around the board by flicking them, and then you're shooting D6s and D10s off the top of them at the other ships, and desperately hoping that you hit the opponent. It's helped by a very, very light activation system where you take turns activating ships. You have 2 actions per turn. There are some basic ships that always do the same things, and then you have a couple of special capital ships that have more abilities. There's a fun little decision space as you're choosing whether you want to repair some of your ships. You could lose your ability to even move your ship, which is hilarious if they hit you with a certain number. But honestly, this is the perfect game for 14-year-old Kellen after high school ends or in between at lunch, where you're just putting out all the pieces, you're starting to play, and you come up with ridiculous scenarios. The game uses a point system, but also has scenarios in it, so you can choose to say, okay, we'll each do 30 points worth of ships. We're going to put them out on the board. It's exceedingly silly. What do you guys think about FlickFleet?
I loved it. I thought it was hilarious and fun and exciting in the way that the best flicking and dexterity games are. Building a fleet, like having X amount of points and building a fleet doesn't really scratch any itch for me specifically. But for what it was, 15 minutes, I had a great time.
Let me tell you, having a certain amount of points that to build an army, I'm all about that.
That's right, I know.
I joked before that this was like a Warhammer theme away from being something I would have purchased immediately. But yeah, no, I dig the army building side of these types of things. And I don't know too much about it in the case of FlickFleet, but I would assume it's simple enough that you could, spend 5 minutes, get a quick little fleet going for like a smaller big game and go at it. It's just simple fun. Like you're flicking ships across the board. You're sort of shouting out loud, you miss, so your shots ricochet off the edge of the table, which also counts as a miss. It's just got all the highs and lows you'd want from that sort of like competitive dexterity game. Yeah. It's great.
But for as simple as it is, like there's a lot of interesting mechanisms going on that are, I think, implemented really, really well. I think the way that you take damage and the way you move and the activation process, everything seems like more robust than what you might think of when you think of a very easy to play flicking game. But it's all implemented, I think, in a really fun, smart way.
Yeah, I think 2 really cool examples of that is one of the wing units is just 3 circles, concentric. Would they be concentric circles? And that represents the 3 health that you have, but also the 3 dice that you can roll when you shoot from it. But as you take damage, you remove one of those rings and your ship gets physically smaller. So it gets harder to hit, but that also represents the fact that you can only roll 2 dice. Then when it's just down to 1, it's a little circle that's substantially harder to hit. But then you also have D6s and D10s, and the D10s represent weaker ships, and those are a little bit more erratic in the flicking because they have more sides. And so those are curving around and doing things that you don't want them to do, where the D6s seem to roll a little bit easier, a little bit straighter. And so that sort of blend where the mechanical elements of the game coincide really well with the physical dexterity of it, the game really gets out of your way and just allows you to play.
Yeah.
Which is everything you want in something like that. So that is called FlickFleet if you're interested in it. I know there are some copies available, but also a Kickstarter for a newer version. I think this is begging for a 4-player version. I don't see why it wouldn't be too long. In our 1v1 here, I was Space God, which was a role I liked being the judge because they kept looking at me, did that hit? And I would thumbs up or thumbs down them. So that is FlickFleet. If that sounds like something you will like, I promise you will like it.
I played a game from 2011, Québec, which is a old school sort of interactive, classic feeling Euro. It feels like a Euro along the lines of, for me, like El Grande, those types of, or Kalis, those types of Euros that don't shy away from interactivity between the players. So the way that Québec works is the game takes place over 4 eras, and there are worker placement spots on the board. And what you're doing on your turn is you're placing your pawn, your architect, your worker, on one of the spots. All the spots have special powers. And if you're the person who places your pawn on that spot, you cannot actually use a spot. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to draw your opponents to put their cubes on to activate the spots. They get the power. But if enough people go on the spots that you've selected, those spots get flipped over. And then there's an area control aspect where you're trying to move onto and flip spots in sections to get points at the end of the game. But what makes Québec really interesting is that at the end of each era, there is a scoring where there are 5 what are called zones of influence. These are where the cubes that are put on these locations go at the end of the round. So, for example, there may be a worker placement spot that's in the red section. Once that spot has been filled with cubes and the person who's put their architect on that spot elects to move off of it, all those cubes will go, because it's a red building, it will go into the red zone of influence. So at the end of a round, there are going to be cubes scattered along all these zones of influence. And each era, you're going to be scoring for all 5 zones, but the way that these zones cascade is going to change from era to era. And the way it works is you first reconcile the first zone. Everybody gets points for as many cubes as they have in the zone, but whoever has the most cubes in a zone gets to keep half of those cubes and cascade it down to the next zone. So, for example, if Kellen had 2 cubes and Neelan had 3 cubes and I had 5 cubes, Kellen would score his 2 points, Neelan would score his 3 points, I would score 5 points, and then also half of my cubes, in this case, it would be 2, it's half rounded down, move into the next section that we are determining. So there's a interesting aspect of trying to figure out which buildings to use because you like their powers, but also because you're going to be able to transport your cubes into a strong position in terms of this cascading. It's a very classic feeling Euro, but with a lot of moves that are a little bit in your face because it's an area control and because you can manipulate where the cubes go. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tempo considerations to make, and it just feels to me like a classic diamond in the rough kind of Euro. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but I think this is a game that both of you would enjoy.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, because it's not too cluttered. It's very streamlined, but it's still sort of fighty. That is Québec.
I'm always interested. You've got an old, ugly Euro.
Yes.
Right? And you've
undoubtedly
got El Grande, which you could have played.
Yes.
But you chose to play Québec.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Or what sparked in you that, I want to get this to the table, even though it's
Québec is not, by board game standards, yeah. Québec is not as streamlined as El Grande. I don't think many games necessarily could be. But where El Grande has those power cards, which are like, I would argue, are like the one sort of like weird, not super streamlined part of the game.
Yeah, things can go
right,
There's
exactly.
You can do about it.
It's basically the same thing, but if you imagine having the El Grande power cards on the board, but you cannot elect to use the cards. If you put your architect on your card, if you put your pawn on one of the cards, other players normally are the ones who can use it. But then you get an area control scoring in the game by having like a lot of areas in the same neck of the woods.
Do you own this?
I do. Yeah.
And if you didn't own it, this is a Mark specific question.
Sure.
If you didn't own it, would it be added to your math trade list to try to pick up a cheap copy?
For sure. This is not
it's good.
For example, this isn't a game that I'm putting up for trade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I put 75% of my games up for trade, and this is not one of them.
So we'll get to it together after we play this 70 new games.
Right.
that we have
Exactly.
to play.
Oh God. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Neelan, what have you been playing?
Well, let's do a quick check-in with Tapestry.
Oh yeah.
What's Tapestry, Neelan? I've never heard of it.
Okay, yeah, it's a cool game. It's about the same
A modern-
era as Quebec.
Yeah.
yeah.
Modern
thereabouts.
Pinnacle.
Yeah. So Tapestry is a game by Stonemaier. We spoke about it last week or a couple of weeks ago, and it is a civilization-themed game.
Dripping
with theme. About sort of advancing on tracks in sort of like a efficiency puzzle optimization way. So the order in which you advance upon these tracks is going to determine how effectively you can do other actions, advance in others, that sort of thing. We spoke about this pretty extensively already, so what I wanted to do is just check back in now that I've played it a couple more times. You've played it a few more times as well, Mark.
Yeah.
I'll start by saying that I would say that as of my most recent game of it, my enthusiasm has dampened a little bit. I still enjoy playing it. I find the specific puzzle that Tapestry offers something that I genuinely quite enjoy. Like I said, it puts to mind Scythe in that it's about executing actions in an optimal order and sort of figuring out how to combine those actions together. I think that it has become more apparent on repeat plays that specific combinations of civilizations and Tapestry cards, when optimally drawn, have a much bigger influence on the game than I would like.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's enough to dissuade me from playing it. How do you feel?
So my first game of Tapestry, I felt like I was in a position where I couldn't win from very early on.
Mm-hmm.
This last game of Tapestry, I felt like I couldn't lose from very early on. I drew a first Tapestry card and a civilization that synergized really well. And as soon as I saw the draw, and as soon as I saw that Neelan and Dan, the other person who was playing, didn't also have an incredible starting set, I was like, well, that's it. I mean, I've won the game.
You were like, GG.
Basically, I mean, I basically felt very, very confident that I'd won the game. And in fact, I won by something like 75 points.
Yeah, you had over 300, which it's the best score I've seen so far. So.
And I don't think, maybe once, I can't even remember it though, did I feel like I made like a clever move or a move that I was proud of.
That's something you mentioned while we were playing it, and it's interesting because like there were a couple of times where I thought I was executing clever things.
Yeah.
Something you pointed out, like you're watching us do these seemingly clever things.
I was watching you and Dan, and I'm thinking like these are really cool moves these guys are doing, and then you're doing it, and then I was like, okay, Dan's like, I'm going to go there, and I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to do this, which moves me up here, and I got 8 points. And then I would do something that was like fell in my lap, the most obvious move in the world, and I had like 16 points. And I was like, I just felt bad. You know, I'm watching you guys do these incredible things and get like very little payoff for them.
It's so interesting, right? Because the decision space on an individual turn, I love how tactical it is.
Yeah.
I love how it's like, it would be fun to step into a random game of Tapestry online and try to figure out what the next best optimal move is.
Sure.
So there's some fun there because you're seeing all the tracks and you have so much information available to you. But it just sounds like, and the more you read online, the more people are like, hey, wait a minute, Tapestry Jack. I'm already envisioning Tapestry Essential Edition with some updated cards.
Right.
I mean, I would be interested in that, but as it stands now, Tapestry is like, honestly, and I don't take great joy in saying this, but Tapestry is one of a handful of games that I am at the level where I would try to beg off a game of if I was asked to play. Like, that is a very high bar for me. Like, I'll play a lot of games I don't like, but I mean, the idea of sitting down to an hour and a half, 2-hour game, which isn't crazy long. Like the length is not ridiculous, but that length combined with my feeling that it's going to be determined on the luck of the draw, it feels like it guts the game to me from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because like while I can absolutely acknowledge that, that's honestly not enough to dissuade me from playing it. I think I've lost every game of Tapestry I've played, quite honestly, but I've still enjoyed the process of playing it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's never going to be a game I love, to be clear, but it's a game that I still wouldn't turn down a game off.
It just feels so weird. Like you sit down and you know on that first draw, you know on that first combination that you've lost or that you've won. It's like, it's just the way my brain is wired, I'm sure, but I just don't see how enjoyment can be derived from that. There's something that fundamentally rubs me the wrong way about that. But anyway, Tapestry.
That's Tapestry. I also played a game which we mentioned a few weeks ago as one of the games on my shame list. So this is a game that I was surprised that I hadn't played yet because I like a lot of Rainer Knizia designs, and this is one of his auction trilogy of games. This is Ra. So I played this for the first time yesterday, in fact. The way Ra works is at the start of the game, you're dealt one of a selection of tiles, and I believe this is player count dependent. So in a 5-player game, I had 3 bidding tiles, and these are all a number between 1 and 16 in the specific player count. And in a round of the game, of which are 3 main rounds called epochs, every player is ideally going to use all 3 of their bidding tiles in order to get a lot. So on your turn, you're either adding a tile to the lot or calling for an auction, calling Ra. The tiles are a combination, which they're not maybe super worth going into, but there are a bunch of different things that are going to get you varying amounts of points. So some of them are going to be monuments, which are only going to score for you at the end. Some of them are going to be civilizations, which will either lose you points if you don't have one every round or get you points if you have sets of them. Some of them pair off of each other. They're these Floods and Nile cards. Others give you like an ability to grab a tile from the lot. So there are a lot of interesting sort of different things you can do with these tiles and interesting ways that they combine to give you different amounts of points. On your turn, you either add to the current lot, call an auction, and you keep doing that until either the epoch ends, which is when everyone's used all 3 of their bidding tiles, or there are a random assortment of just raw tiles in the bag, and if the array that runs along the top of the board fills as well, that just cuts off the end of the epoch immediately. No one gets to bid, and it's over. So you might be sort of biding your time with the bidding tiles you have, waiting for the perfect lot, because say you have the best bidding tile in the game, you know at any point that you're going to be guaranteed to take a lot you want, so you might just be waiting for the perfect lot to take, and you're watching the timer tick down, and then we saw a couple of times if someone just gets cut off from their perfect opportunity to grab really good stuff. So there's a very, very strong element of push your luck to this, which is not only do I think I can keep waiting to get the perfect lot, but also there are these negative tiles in the bag as well. So you might be sort of watching a lot get bigger and bigger, and suddenly a very bad tile comes up, which are these disasters. And then even if you were to take it, you'd be losing some as well as what you're gaining. I liked this. I was perhaps surprised that I didn't like it more, given how it had been described to me as one of these more beloved auction games. It's a game that I definitely would play again. I think I was surprised by how much the push your luck component was actually, I would say, more than the auction component.
Sure.
I think it was more a push your luck game than it was an auction game, in all honesty. And even the way the auction is devised, like Taj Mahal, it's sort of like a abstracted sort of auction. Like, you're not actually bidding a currency. You have this assortment of tiles that you can trade up for different tiles, but there are different values. So your bidding power isn't fully in your control. That's not the right way to say it, but it's not granular. You have 3 discrete bids of 3 different strengths, and you're just finding the right times to use them. You guys both played Ra. How do you like it?
See, I've only played it once long ago and quite enjoyed it. I think the Doctor is a true king. So a doctor and a king. The game is up to 5 players, less than an hour, and it allows you to think in very unique and interesting ways throughout the game. So there's different parts of the game where you go, okay, should I be doing that now or should I be doing this now? With such minimal rules overhead, I just think it should be applauded. I want to play it again, but just the fact that you have that unique experience, it's not like something you've ever done before. The rules explanation probably took 10 minutes, and then you're playing with 5 people and the game's over in an hour. Boom.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 on the face of it.
Yeah, I love it. It's got, like you said, it's got like a push your luck set collection auction, all very tightly bound together, very clean, and yeah, just full of tough decisions. And there are, for a game that looks very plain, there are a lot of like very tense, very like people getting psyched up at the table moments when that timer's kicking
right,
down.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times where you're putting your hand in the bag and everybody's saying like, pull out a raw, pull out a raw.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And that happened at least a couple of times in the game we played, because there's one player that's hoping to get like a tile. They need to activate the rest of their tiles, and they're desperately hoping that comes up before the timer happens. It does lend itself to those big moments. So like I said, there's very sort of heart-wrenching decisions of just like, should I take this and spend my biggest and only a token now to do it, or will something better come along? I'm running. It does have a lot of that. The other thing that's so striking about it is the thing that Kellen maybe alluded to, which is there's something about his designs that just feels so precise and sort of just so mathematically sort of complete, where everything feels like intricately calculated for like value expectation. Nothing felt overpowered. Every single route that people were taking, whether it was monuments or Niles, just felt valid. It's so precise.
So funny talking about Raw after Tapestry.
I'll
leave it at that.
Totally. Yeah.
But
By comparison to that, absolutely. That's going to do it for Raw. And if you like the sound of Raw, you might also want to check out Biblios, Abyss, No Thanks, Medici, Crypt, Priests of Ra, Nanook, Senators, or Scripts and Scribes, the dice game.
Senators is not good.
Oh, these are just games that share the same mechanics as Ra on BGG.
Oh, he's taking a little shot.
ACT-03, bro.
That's fine.
Get
Look, Raw, Biblios. I agree with that. Look, that's great. See, someone who played Raw didn't know about Biblios.
I felt really mad when I saw Biblios on the list. I'm not going to lie.
So before we move on to our featured topic, which are Magic the Gathering player archetypes and how those relate to the board game world. Why are you looking at me like that?
You're not a hype man.
I'm not a hype
all
man?
I'm going to say.
What? Okay, do it. Do the same line I just did.
Well, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
I didn't come here
Mr. Hype
intending
Man,
to
go
host,
for it. Hype
to
it.
host this
That's the
episode.
hype man.
Yeah, go hype it up, hype man.
Said every hype man ever. Oh, you're putting me on the spot.
Don't put a hype man on the spot.
Scripted hype man, this is what we want to be? Okay. All right. Well, before we move on, we are going to read a listener review. Last week's was sort of a bummer, but so we'll see if we can get a more hype review. This comes from Maddie Cone. It's titled, One of the Best in the Biz. So that is going to be a clue for me that this is probably going to be more positive than last week's. These guys combine the best elements of podcasts. Witty banter, fresh takes on old and new games, and thoughtful, honest insights into a variety of hobby topics. One of the few podcasts that I will happily listen to every episode. Thank you, Maddie Cone. That is a very nice review. And if you want to review us, you can do so at Apple Podcasts, Facebook. However you found us is probably a good place to look to review us. So let's dive into this. This topic was suggested by Kellen Hype Man Allen. So the idea is that Magic the Gathering, when they're designing cards, they try to keep three types of players in mind. These archetypes have been referred to as the Timmy player, the Johnny player, and the Spike player.
There are female versions,
Yeah.
Tammy and Jenny, but Spike is androgynous.
Okay. So it's the Timmy Tammy player, the Johnny Jenny player, and then the Spike player. Okay. So let's first just review what these mean. I guess at first it's just in a Magic Gathering context, and then we'll try to translate it into board gaming. So first, the Timmy Tammy player. So this is a player who is looking for, rather than winning being their priority, looking for like the big actions, like to bring out big creatures in Magic or cast big spells. They're looking for the show-stopping moves. Is there anything you guys would add to that description?
I think my best example of this in the context of Magic was if every time you would flick through the starter decks, you'd sometimes see these big worm creatures, which were like 8/8s that cost 8, that are universally regarded as terrible. But you would look at them like, oh my God, I can't wait to get this out of the table and wreck someone with it. That feels like the right ballpark.
I associate this with the move at the table that everyone all of a sudden, stops and goes, oh,
Right.
and our group is very good about doing this very loud.
Right.
This is when you're in The Wizard Always Wins and you're screaming like I just leveled up at the key moment. It's the big moment that in many ways, not to get to specific examples, but you feel is like potentially missing from a game like Tapestry, or one of my criticisms of it was just, where is that moment where everyone looks and goes, oh, what just happened? That was so cool.
So we would say, if we're translating this to the board game world, a Timmy Tammy player, the way they play games is they're looking for hitting a big moment, bringing a big monster out onto the board, doing something along those lines.
In the article, which was the original description from Mark Rosewater, who, by the way, his articles on Magic the Gathering design are fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard it. Doesn't he have like a podcast?
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
If he does, I'm sure it would be great.
Yeah, I've heard it's very, very, very good.
I wanted to try to distill this down to like a single word, and the one that he had in his description, which I thought was perfect, was like it's visceral. Like just those very big, like Kellen said, like shouty big moments, like physicality and like performance.
So the next archetype is the Johnny Jenny player. So this is the player who is interested in winning again, but is more interested in imparting their creativity to the game. They're looking for making, in Magic Gathering, decks that combo off each other well. They're often referred to as the combo player. They're looking for interesting ways to express their self or their style by finding cards that combo together well, or combo in interesting ways, or combo in unexpected ways. They're sort of looking at the game maybe in an artistic sort of bend. They're trying to see the game outside the box a little bit and just find interesting, creative ways to play the game.
I think, an easy way to translate this to board game terms, and everyone is a blend of all of these psychographic profiles, certainly, but a player who tries to immediately come up with a strategy to break the game. I think our friend Dan is a great example of a Johnny type player who, before the rules are even done, he's found some way to not feed your people in Agricola and win the game without ever farming or collecting animals. And that's interesting in and of itself, because it's clear that the goal of the game is to get you to farm. And if you could win without doing that, that would be a very Johnny-like thing to do.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny that you bring up Dan and we bring up Tapestry, because yesterday he Johnny'd the game of Tapestry because he didn't go into his last era until well after I was basically done with the game. So he just had reserved, and then made a big final push. Mm-hmm. So that was a very Dan/Johnny thing to do.
The examples I sort of like from the Magic the Gathering context for this. So in that game, you have these cards which are called land cards, which are how you primarily get mana to power the rest of your cards. And that constitutes about a third of your deck. So they're just a required necessity to power your deck, basically. And the idea is, could I make a deck that doesn't use lands at all, or only uses land, or something like that? So some sort of
restriction.
Inversion of the system almost.
And finally, there is the Spike archetype. And this is the archetype that is most interested in winning. They are happy to, in Magic the Gathering, copy popular decks. They are not interested in flair plays. They're not interested in creative plays. They're interested in creating the most efficient deck, the most tried and true, the most mathematically proven deck in order to win, and win as fast as possible, be it ugly or however. I think this is the most probably straightforward archetype. This is a board gamer who is, again, less interested in the flavor text, less interested in the theme, and more interested, I think, in just winning the game by whatever means is necessary.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about Board Game Barrage as an institution, there I said it, an institution, is that I think when the three of us play a game with each other, we inevitably all turn into Spike.
Sure. I
kind of think of this as the try-hard is another word for Spike, is where in board game land, people talk about, well, is it allowed? Can I look up strategies for a Feast for Odin before I ever play my first game? And a Spike would predominantly be like, what would be wrong with that? It's about the competition and, getting the blood in the water, as opposed to discovering what the game has to offer.
Spikes are mostly the reason I stopped playing Magic the Gathering.
You can't get away from us.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm passing out pieces of paper to the other two guys and pens.
Wow.
Official.
I want you to write down, we're all going to guess which of the three archetypes we are, and then keep them hidden.
Uh-huh.
And
so
then
you're writing down all three?
No, you're writing down which one you think you are.
Oh, well, I think I am.
Yeah,
okay.
Write down the one you think you are.
The one we know we are.
Yeah. And keep it hidden, and then once you've done that, let me know.
Done.
Okay. So now we'll go around the table. So let's start with Kellen. So Kellen will count us off, and we'll at the same time say what we think Kellen is, and then he will reveal if we match or we don't.
Like the Newlywed Game.
That's right. Just like the Newlywed Game.
Where
Just like
have you tapped Magic cards before?
That's perfect.
That was
perfect.
funnier.
Okay.
Oh, God. The fact that you didn't laugh, though. If this is left in straight, it's over.
We're not that kind of show, Kellen. We're not that kind of show.
All right. Oh, I'm counting you
Yes.
off?
Yeah.
Down.
It was a one-sentence instruction.
3, 2, 1.
Timmy.
There it is.
And Kellen wrote...
Timmy!
We all score 1 point.
Oh, I did 3 M's, though, on my Timmy.
That's fine.
I don't know what that means. Yeah, no, I think for me, Timmy is associated with sort of a sense of socialness.
Yeah.
I play to win. There's a Spike somewhere in my heart.
And that's the thing about this. Everybody has some of all three flavors, the archetypes, and even that transitions depending on who you're playing against, what group you're with, what you're feeling like, what game you're playing. So, yeah.
But if I'm playing a game and I see a way to just thrash Mark, it's like I'm in second, Mark's in third, but I could make him in last with 0 points. like I get distracted. I physically get distracted. It's sort of, I equate it actually to similar to public speaking. If I'm public speaking, it doesn't matter what it's about. If I make one person laugh, my focus just changes. It's like, it doesn't, it's like, it's a college, final, and it's like, oh, they're laughing.
Right.
Like, this is perfect.
Throw
And
in
I
the
just
script. Yeah.
beeline it to the jokes.
Yeah.
So for me, Timmy archetype just makes the most sense. It's still fun, but it's like, how explosive can we make this? How social can we make this? And definitely 100%.
All right. Time to do Neelan's. Are you ready? You count us down.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Johnny.
Yeah. That's
And
what I
you
wrote.
go.
In the context of board games, the idea of this being something that is about puzzling out the best possible combinations, those are games I like. Games where you're sort of trying to figure out the systems. I'm not so much into the game breaking side of things, but I like finding the interesting combinations. I gravitate towards games that allow you to do interesting things with them, that either have interesting designs or systems that combine in ways that I've never seen before.
So one of my questions for the Johnny Jennies of the world, you see a lot on board game Facebook groups, on board game websites like BGG, people talking about how they love the modern Euro because there's usually 6 or 7 different strategies that you can sort of explore. Mm-hmm. And so when you pick up a game and it says like 4 pass to win, like, I'm thinking like a Gugong.
Sure.
Like, does that intrinsically appeal to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because that was the thing that was Gugong specifically is a great example because that's a game where you have 7 distinct different systems. You have to interact with all of them a little bit, but the joy to me is like, which of these am I going to go down this time? Or which combination of these am I going to go down this time? One of the things I thought was interesting about this description for this is the idea that Johnnies prefer decks that are more interesting than good. And that's something that really does appeal to me. Like, I am be much more excited if you were to tell me a game was doing something novel than it necessarily being the best game I've ever played. I love games that explore interesting systems and allow you to sort of, exactly.
So I know there's a spike in your heart too.
Oh, totally. And like you said, it comes out with the two of you especially.
So if we Gugong twice in a row, this is just a great example, and the first game you win by exploring a specific strategy, and then we run it back a week later, like how likely are you to say, I've been down that road before, it won me the game? You could optimize that strategy and probably win again, but would you actually start the game and say, I'm going to try a different route this time?
I think so. I think I definitely would. I typically try to do this in most games. So, for example, in a game with asymmetric factions, I'm much more interested in exploring the different factions than revisiting one I've figured out. It's almost like once I've hit the point that I know how something works, it's much less interesting to me. It's one of the things I think was so interesting about when we played Root, for example, which was that game is a game that both rewards repeat plays of a faction and diversifying, but I just wanted to try every single angle on the game first and foremost before I even thought about revisiting one of those factions.
Interesting.
All right. Time for me. 3, 2, 1.
Spike.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up the Gugong example and just those examples you brought up. I want to preface this by saying, like, spikes are known for, like you mentioned, the type of player who would read the strategies in advance. That's something I'm not interested in doing. And also, spikes are known for taking losses very, very hard or being like ultra competitive in that way.
Confirmed.
And I, despite what Kellen says, don't think that that's what I do. But for the Gugong example, like if I played Gugong and I won using a particular pathway, I would play the same pathway the next time. And like when we play any games that has factions, if I play a faction and I like it and I do fairly well, I don't have to win with it, but if I do well with it, I will try to hone that faction in. I'll try to like optimize that faction. And that's why, again, I hate to bring it up again, but Tapestry, the fact that winning is like a random event. I'm all for randomness in games. I don't mind games that are random filled, like that are 15 minutes. But if we're sitting down to play a game, and you're telling me that the winner could be determined based on the initial card draws, I joked about this last night after we played it, but like it almost doesn't feel like a game to me. It's almost like I'd rather watch a television show. If I'm there to be entertained, if you're selling Tapestry to me or a game like that as, oh, you're going to have fun, just sit down and have fun, I'll watch a television show or I'll watch a movie. I'll have fun that's curated in a better way, basically. And winning is certainly, like, for me, the why I'm there. Obviously the social thing, the fun, that's like part and parcel, but if I'm playing a game, I'm playing it to win.
I was so happy that after Kellen raised the idea for this topic, to have two discrete moments with you that exactly cemented this for you, which was one, the tapestry example. You saying afterwards, like, I didn't feel like I was competing. This game is terrible.
Right.
Like, and then when we played FlickFleet before this,
right.
like just how into this ridiculous dice flicking game, you would like hit your dice across the board and go, like turn around and stomp, and it was just like, it was amazing to watch.
Right. And sometimes I worry that comes off as like aggressive, and like I'll talk when we play, but where it honestly comes off on is like a place of trying to connect with my opponents. You know, because if I get smashed in a game, I will over dramatically whine about it just to be like up the ante everywhere. I'm all about upping the ante. So sometimes I worry that crosses the line, but yeah, I just feel like it enhances the experience.
So then I think what's cool is somehow we are all gaming together and sort of predominantly filling this a different psychographic profile here. I feel like I see people online, and Neelan, you mentioned specifically that you stopped playing Magic the Gathering due to spikes, and that's why I stopped playing like digital card games like Hearthstone, or even some MMOs where it's just all you do in the game is figure out what the meta is, copy paste, and play it.
And then you're competing against people that are literally playing guides.
Yeah, just optimally. So the question is, people online will say, well, I won't play board games with a spike because there's so much beauty, there's so much fun to explore, and then spikes over here, you know, I think using a spike to, you know, literally murder everyone at the table. And so do you feel like, in the same sense that we talk about discussions where it's best to establish what everyone's intention is up front. Like if you try hard a party game, for example, if you spike a party game, like you're a loser, kind of. So how does our group work? And then do you feel like people would be best served by playing games with a variety of these types of people, or actually like it works well if everyone is a Jenny, so to speak? Do you see the question?
Yeah,
it's not formulated well.
Totally, but I think there's absolutely value in both, and I think that largely depends on kind of you as a personality, really, because I think that there are a lot of board game groups that are either going to be all Johnny Jenny type players, and they enjoy that. These, like, you know, very multiplayer, solitaire focused people that are not worried so much about it being ultra competitive, ultra interactive, and they can enjoy the process of playing that game together, right? At the same time, like, I think what always surprises me is when I play a game with either of the two of you that I think fall pretty hard into the other two archetypes, it feels like a substantially different experience, because it's either a lot more vocal, a lot more interactive because of Kellen, or just a lot more competitive because of what you bring to it, Mark. So I personally enjoy that, but I also think I've got a healthy dash of some of the other two, maybe more than I would say a stronger Johnny Jenny archetype might do. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely played games with spikes that I hated because they're like head down, boom, 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 your turn. Boom, boom. Like there's no interaction. There's no like joking around. There's nothing like that. And that's awful. I would much rather play a game with somebody who's just joking around, doesn't care at all, which is not something I generally would like to do. I want to play with somebody who's like in it to win it. But I would prefer a blasé player versus a ultra spike, no fun, just win sort of thing. So I think a mixture of things is ideal. When I think about an all Timmy group or an all Jenny Johnny group, that feels a little neutered to me. If there's no stakes, it feels like, yes, I see where a board game would be a fun experience or be an experience that all the players involved would enjoy, but it just feels like there's a missing component if the competition is not there.
One of the things that I think about when we play new games, and I wonder how it applies here, you know, is the types of strategies that we all employ. You know, I think Neelan, for example, loses our first play of games much more often than the two of us do. And I wonder if some of that comes down to the type of player that he is, where there's more interest in exploring it as opposed to winning. By the same token, you know, if we play a game like Seven Wonders, you know, classic Seven Wonders, I can look at the strategies sometimes and make predictions about where you guys will go. Like the green science cards with exponential scoring is a classic Mark move. If Mark sees that in a game, his eyes are lighting up with the points. You know, he's going to be going for science. So in a game like Seven Wonders that none of us have ever played before, I make these heuristic sort of determinations. Mark is going to be going for that. Nealon is going to get distracted by all the kingdom cards available in Dominion and not focus on the money that he needs to win. And I kind of use those in a way to maneuver the game state.
Yeah, and I've noticed that about you a lot. And sometimes it forces me to like double think my own things. Like when we are playing a game like for the first time and the rules are explained, and I see like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then I think to myself, well, Kellen's going to think that's what I'm doing. So should I keep doing it or should I try to do something to counter that?
Interesting. One of the descriptions, I don't know if this is a commonplace term, but someone had described to me this idea of lever pulling as a board game process. And that's something that's really rang really true to me from exactly the way you described. I love the idea of, exactly like you said, of feeling out a system the first time I play it, more than necessarily barreling down a singular path. And that it just felt like, yeah, especially apt in my case.
All right, so let's talk about maybe games that we think might best evoke the Timmy, Tammy, Johnny, Jenny, Spike mentality, or games that we like because they sort of scratch those itches for us. I'll go ahead and start. So for the Spike player, a couple games that came to mind, Marco Polo. I know that Marco Polo 2 is coming out soon, so I'm excited about that. But Marco Polo is such a tight game where the powers are so asymmetric that, I think it really, for me, focuses me into a path or a style that you really want to hit hard and quick because the game is going to be over before you know it, and you really need to take advantage of your faction power to its fullest. So that's, again, it's always sort of scratch that itch. Along the same lines, Rising Sun, when I was speaking earlier about finding a faction I like and playing it over and over again, that's one of the games that sprang to mind. I've played the Koi faction a couple times and really enjoyed them, really enjoyed the sort of faction power and the edge that I felt like it gave me. And so in the subsequent plays that I've had of Rising Sun, I always try to angle to try to get the Koi clan if I can. And finally, Crokinole is another game that jumped to mind. And this is more along the lines of what Nealon was talking about when we played FlickFleet. Dexterity games can be like the most visceral games where you can really do a lot of talking and jumping around and joking around, and it can be, again, the most like visceral, like palpable experience. And that's something that it sort of accentuates the wins and even like accentuates the losses, which I'm not against. So yeah, those sprang to mind. Nealon.
So the games I had, one of my favorite examples is Dominion, especially because the reason I like Dominion so much actually is very much rooted in Magic the Gathering, so it feels like a super appropriate example here. Dominion is a game where you're building it's a deck building game. It's a game where you're building a deck over the course of playing it, and what's so appealing about that is seeing a card in the market and thinking, okay, this is going to work especially well in my deck, or this is going to combo with this other card, and really sort of constructing your deck in exactly the meticulous way you'd want to so that it combos off itself really effectively. So it's kind of like what I like about being a Johnny player in Magic the Gathering condensed into a board game. So that's Dominion.
What sets of Dominion do you still have?
I don't own Dominion at all, actually, because
you never had?
No, because Dean has like all of it, so it just seemed like, why start?
So just repeat after me. Dominion Alchemy is my favorite expansion.
Dominion Alchemy is definitely the best expansion.
Perfect. You'll get hate mail for month.
Oh, good. I haven't got enough of that. The other game is Terraforming Mars. So I've only played this once, but it did strike me as a game that is especially ripe for this style of gameplay. Like it's an engine building game where you're getting the cards you need either through drafting or drawing, and you're trying to just combine them in the best possible way to sort of get an engine that fuels itself, that has one, there are multiple different avenues you can pursue, and you want to sort of find an engine that sort of propels itself in the best way possible over the course of the game. And finally, one of my favorite games, Tzolk'in, and more recently something like Teotihuacan. These are also games that feed off of, again, like Kellen was saying about Gagong, having multiple paths, but finding the best way to sort of exploit one of these paths by combining different elements. Tzolk'in especially feels like a game where you're setting yourself up for combos by the way that the timing mechanism works. So I plant a worker over here. I'm sort of going to get the dividends on that when this other worker progresses to this point at the same time as this other worker. So you're setting up combos turns from now. So that felt especially apt as well.
Con.
So for the Timmy players out there, like me, good games to look at are games like Cosmic Encounter. Cosmic Encounter is very hand management, card driven, and you have a card called Card Zap, and that card allows you to just stop someone else's card or someone else's alien power from happening, and it's all about the moment that you want to do that, because you want to do it every time, but you can't because you only have one. And so inevitably in this game, there's the most important time to do it when you should do it, but then there's times where you know it's going to be way funnier to do that card, a way bigger moment when Mark is relying on his alien power. He has to lose the battle in order to win the battle, so he plays a really crappy card, and then you card zap him, and it's hilarious because he played a 1 in the big battle he needed to win in that big moment. So Cosmic Encounter allows you to have that fun, even within the framework of still trying to win the game. Another great example, and it's no surprise given that it was designed by the same people, is Dune. Dune has a spectacular trader mechanic, which is at the beginning of the game, you're given one of the other player's leader tokens. And if that leader ever comes to you in battle, doesn't matter what they do, you, I win the battle. And so what that does is it means you're going to be provoking that player the whole game because you want that to happen so desperately. So it's like, well, why is Kellen being aggressive with me? Is he got one of my leaders? Is he not? And then there's even within the game, if you're the Harkonnen, that might be the faction for you if you're the true and living Timmy player, because you're getting a lot of those leader traders. So Dune is another great example of a Timmy type game. And the last one from my main doctor / king, Carl Chudiak, is Glory to Rome. And Glory to Rome, it feels more Euro, more action selection, Puerto Rico, Race for the Galaxy-like, except the buildings you make completely break the game. And so that moment that you build the building that allows you to just completely ruin the rules has everyone else with their mouths open going, that's not fair. And you're absolutely right. That's what Glory to Rome does best. And so it is similar in some ways to a Dominion game where you look at all the available kingdom cards and you get distracted by something that sounds more fun than winning. In Glory to Rome, you look at the building, you say, I have to build this fountain.
Right.
Like, there's just, it doesn't matter I have to do this because it's going to be jaw-dropping. So Glory to Rome is another great example if you find yourself of the Timmy Tammy persuasion. Tim Tams?
Tim Tams.
Pretty good.
Tim Tams are pretty
Tim Tams?
They're not available in the U.S.
I know. I'm a cultured man. Tim Tam Slam? Come on, dude. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What is a Tim Tam Slam? Is that the one where you bite the end off of it? And
yeah,
you,
the
drink?
corners, and then you suck through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's delicious.
No,
why
no,
are you laughing at
I'm
me?
not laughing at anything.
A man of culture. That's
true.
Tim Tam Slam.
So that's going to do it for our discussion of Magic the Gathering / board gaming archetypes. Join the Discord if you haven't already. And in the podcast channel, let us know which archetype or archetypes you are. That is a mandate from me. So if you're on the Discord, go on the podcast, let us know. Let's have a Timmy, Tammy, Johnny, Jenny, Spike free-for-all. That sound fun? That sounds fun, right? Hype, get hype.
Fun. Hype man, Mark.
When you hear this, we are going to have absconded to Vancouver for Shucks 2019. That's where we are right now. So if you are in Vancouver or if you want to fly out to Vancouver real quick, you can find us there. I'm sure there's going to be some audio, some video, some sort of something that is going to be released from the show. So we are super excited about that.
Yeah, if you're in Vancouver and you want to play games with us, please join the Discord. That's boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. We are already organizing some meetups, some games we want to play, and we desperately need your attendance at our panel at Shucks. Our goal is to have more attendees than the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast record, which we're obviously close. It's their convention, but I mean, obviously.
Kind of weird they invited us to overshadow them.
Yeah, that is strange. So
we're recording in a 1,000-person hall, right?
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
so that's going to be easy.
Yeah, that'll be filled. A little bit of overflow. A couple hours early.
It's
The
like
line's going to be going around the building.
Yeah. Right. In the meantime, beside our Discord, you can find us on any form of social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. If you look for us, you'll find us. We are at BoardGameBarrage.com. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for the song What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. And that's going to do it. See you in Vancouver. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. SPOBO stands for sporadically bored. Bleep it. Bleep it. That's great. SPOBO stands for sporadically bored. A barrage is like an art. Rising sun. Rising Sun. Not BGB's favorite game of 2018 because of Callan Allen. Rising Sun. Rising Sun. Blood Rage, but with a Japanese theme, but not as good. Rising Sun.
I love this
Rising Sun.
Okay.
beat per
Not Cthulhu Wars.
Not Turtle Clan.